vSphere with Tanzu delivers developer-ready infrastructure by allowing IT teams to use their existing vSphere environments to rapidly deploy Kubernetes clusters for their development teams. A simple enablement wizard gets you up and running in minutes. We start with a set of ESXi hosts managed by vCenter. You configure your vSphere distributed switch with a network for your management traffic, a front-end network for load balancer virtual interfaces, and a workload network for placement of Tanzu Kubernetes cluster nodes. You will have a choice in the deployment and management of load balancers. Here we deploy HA proxy and connect it to each of our vSphere distributed switch port groups. Enabling vSphere with Tanzu creates the Kubernetes control plane nodes on vSphere and connects them to the management and workload networks. The embedded Kubernetes control plane exposes a set of services, including the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid service for vSphere. The TKG service gives developers on-demand access to upstream-aligned, fully conformant Kubernetes clusters. Let's see how easy this is to set up. We have already deployed HA proxy and configured it through a simple OVF wizard. You have a choice of networking options, and we are using the vSphere distributed switch. Our ESXi cluster has HA and DRS enabled, making it compatible for vSphere with Tanzu deployment. Next, we choose the size of the Kubernetes control plane nodes and the storage policy used for placement of the nodes. We need to tell vCenter about our HA proxy load balancer, providing the data plane API interface, the range of virtual IPs that can be used, as well as the credentials and certificate. The management network is used for the Kubernetes control plane nodes to communicate with vCenter and to update load balancer configuration in HA proxy. The workload networks are where the Tanzu Kubernetes cluster nodes are placed. Each supervisor namespace can have its own workload network to provide isolation for development teams. We choose the workload port group for our network and specify the range of IPs that can be allocated to TKG cluster nodes. The content library contains the base images that will be used for the VMs that make up the TKG clusters that developers create. Once we click Finish, the supervisor cluster Kubernetes control plane nodes are provisioned with our network configuration and integration to our HA proxy instance. And the Tanzu Kubernetes cluster service is enabled. After enablement is complete, the IT administrator can verify the cluster is running and see the load balancer virtual IP that has been assigned. Namespaces are resource envelopes that allow IT admins to assign policy that define how developers consume resources via self-service. We are creating a namespace called TKG and assigning it a workload network. We also define a storage policy and permissions. The load balancer virtual IP is shared with the appropriate development teams, where they can log in and be authenticated through vCenter single sign-on. Self-service cluster creation through the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid service is a simple submission of an appropriate specification file to the supervisor cluster Kubernetes API. vSphere with Tanzu, Kubernetes workloads running in minutes with developer-ready infrastructure.